So sorry to keep anybody out there waiting, but welcome to This Week Unloaded. Tonight we have with us first Mr. Rob D, the New York Outcast. How are you tonight, Rob?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yep. And next we got from the state of Arkansas, Gun Loving Grandpa, also known as Buck. How are you tonight?
I'm doing good. Thanks for the invite.
Yep. And last but not least, and hopefully we'll have some other people join us later. Don't know. I sent out a bunch of links. We'll see if anybody else shows up. But right now we have Mystic Guns, aka Stacy. How are you tonight?
Oh, I'm doing good. Not too bad. Sitting in OKC.
And Clovertax out there says, "Party on, Wayne. Party on, Garth." I completely lost my train of thought of what I was going to do. Thanks, Clover. Oh, first I want to start by saying congratulations to the crazy Scotsman who is getting his U.S. citizenship tomorrow after a long fight with the Census Bureau, or not Census Bureau, whatever the people that do that stuff. I can't even talk right now. But naturalization department and all that. So congratulations for him. Are in order. And I also want to say to everybody out there, happy Flag Day. Today is Flag Day. And happy birthday to my military branch of choice, the United States Army. They were founded on this date back in 1775. So happy birthday to the United States Army. And those of you who have been following the show know that we've been going over Wild West guns and stuff. So what were we supposed to go over tonight, guys? Anybody here remember what we were supposed to talk about tonight?
Rifles, shotguns.
Yeah, shotguns.
Oh, shotguns.
Yeah, shotguns. Last week was rifles.
Oh, I was here too.
Yeah. So what do you say?
Are you sure we're not talking about, things you can, birth in a cab or, farm-related stuff?
No, we're not doing farm-related stuff.
Are you
Pat's
sure?
not here, thank God. Pat's not here.
But I am.
No, yeah, but Pat's the one that likes to gross everybody out. Or at least he likes the grossed out Ghost Tactical.
Yeah, I haven't seen him in the chat yet.
Amy, shut up. My wife is over there she's trying to say it real quietly so nobody would hear, but she's talking about how you castrate a cow. It's like, no, we're not going there.
No, and ignore him because someone tried to stop castrating. Do that.
There are idiots everywhere.
It was fun taking that off of him.
I'm sure it was. Anyway. Ignore my wife. I know it's hard sometimes.
I like your wife. Why would I ignore her?
We need to get the two of you in the same room. That would just be hilarious.
We totally do.
She won't get on one of these panels. All right.
She's scared.
I think she will before too long. She's getting closer and closer to the microphone there.
Oh, she was. Did you see G23 show last night? She was going off on, or was that on Gary's show on Friday? But she was going off on Rob.
Yeah, that was G23.
No, G23 was Rob asking what flowers she likes to make up for the other one.
Yeah, she likes me.
Anyway, we're everybody's seeing what I got on my screen right now.
Yes, sir.
All right. What you're looking at right now, ladies and gentlemen, is your typical Wild West shotgun. What everybody thinks of when they think of a Western shotgun. These are your coach guns and a double barrel full length. They'll take this, cut it down, and boom, you would have your coach gun. It came in a couple different varieties. These ones are all the double trigger style. Start with this one because this one's actually labeled as a coach gun. They could have a barrel anywhere between 16 to 20 inches on the coach guns. Just remember, this was before the NFA, where you could have a barrel that was only 12 inches on your shotgun if you wanted to, and nobody gave a damn. But yeah, would be your typical. Again, this one.
It's the good old days.
What was that, Rob?
So that's the good old days.
Yeah. Notice the double hammers on the outside, double triggers. Each hammer had its own separate trigger. If I remember right, its front trigger's right hammer, back rear trigger's left hammer, and then you got the release right around. See the release right there behind the hammer. It's a little piece that's like looks like a little hump behind the hammer there. You flip that to the side, it breaks open, and you either have self-extracting or you would extract them manually, which means you would have to grab the shell and pull them out. Some did, some didn't. Just depended on how much money you had to spend on your shotgun. And ignore the tank safety on those. Thanks to current laws, they have to put safeties on firearms that shouldn't have safety, and that's why that's on this replica. You wouldn't actually have had that tank safety on the original. And in case you don't see where the tank safety is, we're right behind where the little lock to open it is. That's a thing that looks like a light switch. That's the tank safety. It's kind of like what Mossberg has. I would show you in better detail on my Shockwave, but YouTube frowns on showing guns on live streams nowadays. So, and this one here looks like it would be a fairly more expensive style with the checkering and stuff that's on there. You notice you have the checkering. Checkering back in the West, while it was available, was expensive. That all had to be hand done back then. Basically, getting checkering on your stocks was just about as labor intense as what it would be to engrave back then, because they didn't have machines that would do that. All had to be done by hand. So whenever you see checkering like that on a shotgun or a rifle, that would symbolize it being a more expensive variety back in the day. So this was would have been a fairly decent priced coach gun back then. And you see they got the single bead sight, which you'll still find on shotguns today. Shotguns really haven't changed much, to be honest, between then and now. The main difference between this shotgun and a modern, and this one might very well, because it is a modern replica, be capable of it, but the shotguns from the 1800s and the ones you would find now, the ones now would be using smokeless powder, and back then they would be using black powder still in their shotgun shells. And you would have metal shotgun shells. They weren't plastic. So that's basically your main difference. And today your double barrels mostly are going to be internal hammers instead of the external. You'll still find external hammers like this, but most of your sporting shotguns today that are double barrels are going to have internal hammers. So that's what we're looking at on those. And apparently Ozzy was alive back then, because he says he remembers the good old days. So anybody got any questions about these here?
No, they look pretty simple there. I like that though.
Now,
I like that engraving right in there.
Was that Rob?
Are these the type of guns that were referred to as street sweepers at one time?
This will be the type of gun that was carried. You know the expression "riding shotgun."
Yeah,
that comes from the old stagecoaches, and this will be the type of shotgun that would be carried by the guy that was riding shotgun.
Yeah.
The more street sweeper style we'll get to a little bit later on when we switch over to another style.
Okay.
But yeah, these were your typical stagecoach guard shotgun. That's why they had the shorter barrel. Maybe it was easier for them to whip the shotgun around because you didn't have that extra barrel length. And the fighting it when the stagecoach was being robbed would have been at close to short distances. So they could pick one of these up and boom, boom, give somebody both barrels real quick. And then if they had somebody at longer distances, they would have a rifle that they would use. Like if they were being chased by Indians, indigenous people, Native American, pick your noun of choice, they would have rifles and stuff they would fight with, because obviously a shotgun wasn't going to be as much value in that situation. But
Were those still chambered in like 12 gauge, 20 gauge, and
okay,
16 gauge?
most of your coach guns would have been 8 gauge, 10 gauge, or 12 gauge. Yeah, I said 8 gauge. You want to talk about a gun that kicks like a mule? 8 gauges are fun.
Oh yeah, my brother-in-law's got one.
And you can't really find 8 gauge ammo anymore because nobody really makes a modern 8 gauge. But you reload them, and somebody that's got one, fire one once. You might not want to do it again.
No, I watched him fire it a few times, and he's smaller than I am.
The thing with these, you gotta remember with the old black powder ones like they had back then, they didn't produce as much recoil because black powder doesn't produce as much energy as what smokeless powder does. So even though a 10 gauge back then would have been more equivalent to what you would get in recoil to a 12 gauge today, whereas a modern 10 gauge, they can be painful to shoot. So, it's different. That's roughly your powder difference. I've actually fired a black powder 10 gauge that felt almost like a 16 gauge in recoil. So there was difference between the felt recoil between a modern shotgun round and the old black powder ones that you would have seen back in the 1800s. And by the way, this has a case hardened frame if anybody's interested in buying one of these. Case hardened with the white bead front sight. Yeah. A lot of these shotguns, instead of having a brass, would have had a steel front sight because it would have been cheaper. But you would also find the brass like you would see now. I mean, it's basically the same thing, just a little metal bead that sits in between the two barrels on the rib that runs between them. All right. And here's another, just to look at it. Here's another one. This would have been your coach gun style. This is supposed to be a replica of the one that was used at the OK Corral. I don't know if it actually is or not, and remember the OK Corral wasn't actually at the OK Corral, but it gives you an idea of what they look like. Different varieties, different way. The metal and everything would have been treated. This one's looks like it has a shorter barrel. What's the barrel length on this one? Yeah, see, this one's a 14 1/4 inch barrel. You're getting closer to that street sweeper style shotgun like you were asking about with this one, Rob. Again, notice the checkering on the grip. That would have been indicative of this being a higher cost shotgun back then. And it's also got engraving there on the receiver. I don't know if you can see it very well, but there is some engraving on there. So this would have been a higher price shotgun than the previous one we were looking at. You can see the fore end's a little bit different there too, the hand guard underneath the barrel.
It looks nice.
So that's a couple of different versions of the double barrel. And it's right here, so you get a better idea of what I was talking about. Here's your latch to break up that you'd use to break it open, and here's your two hammers. Firing pin for the right barrel, firing pin for the left barrel. Hammers will come down and strike those and set them off. So, give you an idea what they did. And they said, here's that tang safety. This has to be there because of modern laws with importing firearms. Firearms, when they're imported from another country, have to have some kind of safety on them. So that's why you get that on there. Doesn't belong there, but at least they tried to make it look like it would be original to the weapon with the coloration and everything on it, and the way the metal's treated. So that's a nice touch anyway. A lot of times you'll see a safety on a firearm like this, and it just looks so out of place because it's an afterthought. At least with these, they put some thought in it and actually made it look like it might have been there at one time. And then here's where you get to a rather interesting shotgun. The 1887 lever action. The first repeating shotgun.
It's lever action, isn't it?
No, it's lever. It's lever.
I think people in the chat love to hear it called lever.
No, it's lever. Anyway, this was the first shotgun design that came out of the mind of John Moses Browning. You may have heard of that guy. More firearms patents, I believe, than anybody else in history in his name. Basically used almost the same style action as what the Winchester rifles. These were produced by Winchester. And you can see one of the differences: internal hammer, no hammer spurt,
no rear sight on that.
No shotgun. You just got your standard like bead sight right there, just like you would find. That was the common way of doing it back then. Shotguns would have a bead front sight, and that would be about it. Very rarely would you see a rear sight on a shotgun back then, and the ones that did cost you a pretty penny. Yeah, as you can see, the looks very similar to the Winchester rifle. The receiver's a little bit different. Yep, that's what this is. Yeah, it's got the case hardened. This one actually has chokes. The originals would have been cylinder bore, which means they would have been the same diameter all the way down the tube. But this was a big advancement in shotgun technology right here. These predated the pump action shotgun and the semi-auto.
How many rounds did it hold?
4 or 5. Let's see how much this says this one holds. And it doesn't say. I believe there were 4 or 5 rounds in the tube. Capacity says no. Oh.
Well, that's helpful.
Yeah, isn't it? Well, we can look at one of the other ones. Maybe one of the other ones will say what the capacity is on it. Capacity. No, you're not allowed to know. I'm not telling you. Let's see, what's this one? 5. This one says it was 5 in the full length. 28-inch barrel. These came in various barrel lengths, just like the other shotguns. That is a pretty shotgun.
Yeah, that is, ain't it?
Yep. And you get, I don't know if they had these stuff like that back then, but it's cool to look at. You can print them, and I'm sure somebody would have done it, So, got your more Mossberg Shockwave style shotgun here. Oh, excuse me, firearm.
Yeah.
I wonder how comfortable that would be to shoot with a grip like that.
No different probably than what the Shockwave would be.
Man, I haven't fired one of those, but that seems like an awful small grip. Yeah, I don't know. I guess not small. I don't know. It's just curious, I guess. I want to Paul Harrell it.
Well, it's got an 18.5-inch barrel. You could always put a full-length stock on there. I don't know why they went with a stockless. Probably because somebody did back then do this.
And it kind of looked like you're going to hold on to a shovel handle.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I said, this one's the bootleg. Yeah, I could see this being of some use to somebody somehow back then. You get the guy on their horse, and maybe this would have been a better design on a horseback or something.
Yeah, definitely close range or something. I mean, sure, it could be useful.
You got it in one of the the sheath or scabbard, the scabbard on your horse, like you would a rifle, and it's about overall length will be about the same length as what a full length Winchester carbine would have been. So I can see this possibly being of use to somebody back then. The shotgun you have in your hand is better than the one you left at home, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe even a barkeep or whatever you would call them at that time, something like that. Small, quick, you can pull it out. You're not. It's all fairly close range, and it makes the point. So.
Moves out there. He says he has a 50 cal muzzle loader, 14-inch pistol. It kicks like it's pissed off. I bet it does.
Yeah.
Let's see what we got now. Is that style? And here's the one you were asking about earlier, Buck, before we went live. This would be it looks like it would be your standard double barrel, but this is a muzzle loader. You would load one barrel, then the other barrel, come back here, put your little caps on there, and you would fire. Take a look. Say that this one was a lot slower to reload than the other ones we were looking at would be an understatement. But this is what they had to deal with. And so, here's your muzzle loading shotgun. Basically the same, different. The only real difference is that it muzzle loads and it doesn't have the breech lock back here to where you can open it and put shells in it. But you can see where good, Buck. What were you say?
I said that looked like a pretty decent rifle, though. I like the bluing on the side and everything.
Yeah, the case hardening.
Yeah.
And again, you'll notice it's got the checkering on there. So again, this would have been indicative of a higher quality, higher price shotgun from that era.
Now, with that checkering, I'd assume there was probably always the handyman guy or whatever, somebody whittling away. A lot of cheaper firearms, I'd assume, probably ended up getting checkered as well. Or would you think not?
Well, if you had the money, you could always buy a uncheckered weapon, and as you got money, take it to your local gunsmith, and they would have somebody there. They may have somebody there that could do the checkering in-house. So, yeah, it was always possible that you could get it checkered later on.
Well, I would think most people, back in the day, per se, would just do it themselves. Maybe customize it or put the family name or something like that. I don't know. People, it was more average that people were talented in carving, things like that, back a long time ago. So.
Not everybody didn't know how to do that kind of stuff. It takes a lot of practice and training to do that kind of stuff by hand. You might have a furniture shop that you could have took it to, and somebody in the furniture shop would have been able to do it too. You had other options, but the typical person on the frontier, to get really good checkering, they weren't generally going to have the skill set to do it.
Yeah, I just figured, the whole bubbling up your gun thing's probably been around since guns were made, but
who
knows?
You could do your own modifications.
Customizing and whatnot.
Yeah.
But.
Well, the Indians, for example, and some of the Mexican bandits, they would put little tacks in there that would do the same thing. It would create a grip surface on there. They would use little brass tacks. So there were other ways to get the same basic effect without having to go through all the intricate work that would need to be done to do the engraving like that to get the checkering. There were other ways of, where there's a will, there's a way. You know what I mean? I guess you could say. And then the really expensive ones, they would have engraving, they would have checkering and whatnot up on the handguard here too. And then you would, of course, you could have the engraving on the receivers and stuff, and the barrels. They would engrave the barrels too back then. So, but yeah, there's your standard muzzle loading shotgun. And you, just like today, you could put birdshot, buckshot, or a slug in that, and it would fire it. Firing a slug out of these would have been akin to using a musket. So essentially, if you're using slugs, you got a double barrel musket instead of a single barrel musket.
Yeah. They still look pretty interesting, though.
Mm-hmm. And there were shotguns this style that instead of having the cap and the nipple for the cap up there, it would have been a little flash pan, and you would have the flint on the hammer. They did have flintlock. Remember the flintlock system that was on the Kentucky Rifles? They had double barrel shotguns that were like that too back then.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Shotguns have been around for a long time. I don't have a picture of one, but an interesting one we were talking about before we went live was the blunderbuss. It would have been right about where that little notch is there for the ramrod to go through. Would be about where your barrel would have ended, and then it would be like a funnel opening, and you could put just about anything down that barrel, and they would fire it. They were real popular with sailors and even pirates because they could be used to repel boarders or in your own boarding operation on a ship if you were in ship-to-ship combat. Like we were talking, you would find people putting silverware, rocks, whatever they could get their hands on down the barrels of one of the blunderbuss and shooting it out of it. So that's an interesting. The blunderbuss is an interesting little development of the shotgun that was around for a good bit of time. There were flintlock blunderbusses, cap style blunderbusses, so they were around for a while. You might even had a matchlock. I don't know if they were in the matchlock era or not. A matchlock would have been, again, it would have been more like your flintlock, but instead of a flint, you would have a length of rope that would be burning at the end, and that's how you would ignite your powder. And the length of rope was what they called it, the match, and you pull your trigger, that would fall down into your flash pan, ignite the powder that was in the flash pan, and set off. And that was in both muskets and shotguns as well. So that predated the flintlock. There was another one, I can't remember what it was. There was another style that predated the flintlock too, and for the life of me right now, I can't remember what the action was called. But they would have had muskets and shotguns in that action as well. So the shotgun's been around for a long time. The modern musket, you would have the shotgun right along, or not the modern musket. We don't have muskets really anymore. But the musket, almost the entire length of its history, had a shotgun that would have been right beside it. And we're very similar in production. You could use a musket as a shotgun, as a single-barreled rudimentary shotgun. One of the common things that was used in the muskets was what they called buck and ball. You would have a couple rounds of buckshot with your standard ball that the musket fired in front of it, and when you fired, it would spread out. The buckshot would spread out from the ball round and give you a little bit bigger area of effect with the weapon. Kind of like a modern.
Yeah, I think I heard other people talking about that.
Yeah,
Putting
there's a
that
modern.
buckshot in there.
Yeah, Winchester makes a modern equivalent to that in their PDX line for defensive purposes, where it's a slug with a couple of balls of double-aught buckshot. So it's an old idea, but it's still around. All right, we'll go up here now and get into something really cool. Start with the black powder version. This is called the Howdah. These were little Howdah. These were the Howdah. These were used mainly at first in like India by the British, which is where the name comes from. They were essentially a double-barreled short shotgun. You could fire, and these were used hunting. The Howdah. You ever watch like a Tom and Jerry cartoon, and you got the guy hunting on the back of the elephant with the bit, and he's in that big box? That box was a Howdah, and these were used for defensive purposes when you were hunting on an elephant. That's where they first came from. And that's why they were called the Howdah pistol. They were used in the Howdah. And eventually, they would go on, and you would find them spread. They quickly moved to other areas because of the effectiveness of them. And this would have been your basic like street sweeper style shotgun that you were asking about. And you could shoot a ball out of these. I forget what caliber, so I do not remember off the top of my head right now what caliber they fired. It probably says down below. But you could also load them with a buckshot if you wanted to. So they were essentially a shotgun.
I'll take two.
Okay, it says that they were 58 caliber. And they also had a 20 gauge. So you could have this in a 58 caliber rifled or a 12 gauge smoothbore. Or 20 gauge, excuse me, smoothbore. So that would be quite effective. Little firearm.
Yeah, I think I had to go to 20 gauge on that one.
Yeah. This one here would be a muzzle loader. Okay.
Does it state the weight of it?
Walmart and send it down, then they use it to send the funds overseas to charities.
Sorry, what was that?
Does it state the weight of it?
The weight?
Yeah.
We can scroll down and see what the weight of them would have been. They're about 5 pounds.
Okay.
And remember,
I'm just trying to figure out what the recoil must be like on something that small. Even 20 gauge, but 5 pounds, that's not too bad. At least it's, not like, 3 pound gun or something like that. So
and remember, this would have been black powder. So it's not going to be the same as a modern 20 gauge. So you're talking a little bit less recoil. So they would have been very manageable. And remember, these were a last ditch style designed weapon to be like a last ditch thing. These weren't your primary weapon when you were on the back of the elephant. But if you had to, if you had a tiger that was going to try and attack your box, you would be grabbing one of these and using that because it would have been a lot faster to bring to bear than what the rifle that you would have been using at the time. And again, this one's a muzzle loader, cap and ball style. You see the little ramrod there underneath the barrel.
yeah.
But these persisted and were around into the era of the cartridge, which we'll see in a minute. And they underwent a little bit of design changes as well. Here would be your Howdah pistol that after they progressed to being a cartridge style. Again, you'll see just like with the shotgun, you got the little latch there to open up the breech. And again, these could have the automatic ejectors or manual ejection, which again means that you would have to pull the shells out. See if we can see here. Yeah, I can't really. That might be the ejector there. It's hard to tell, but get a better look at the.
That looks beautiful, I think.
Yeah, the Howdah pistols were always highly ornamental because they were meant to be used by the rich when they were on their hunting trips. So they would have a little bit more ornamentation than what your standard shotguns would, and the wood on them would have been highest quality. I mean, look at the green in that walnut there; it's beautiful. Yeah, and these would be popular. You would have people here in the United States that would cut down shotguns to basically mimic what these were. A perfect example would be the shotgun that was used by James Caan in the movie El Dorado. If you guys remember that one with John Wayne and Robert Mitchum. James Caan couldn't shoot worth a damn, so John Wayne had him go and buy a customized little sawed-off shotgun from the gunsmith named the Swede in the movie. Basically, that's where the idea for that would have came from these, and you can see there, like I was saying, that looks almost just like a modern bead sight, and that's what these would have used. That's what the shotguns back then would have used. That would have been your sight on just about any shotgun back then. Just a little bead sight, just like that. And you still find those on shotguns today.
Yeah, that kind of looks like more like a modern day.
$2,000. That's a lot of dang money.
Yeah, those little bead sights, they've been around for a long time. And this one would have been a 1920s era version of it. This is a 1920s era. So even the Howdahs, they were around for a long time.
That is a beautiful gun, though.
Let's see, what caliber was this one in? This one would have been 45-10. So this one wouldn't have been the one that you would have been carrying as a defense against a tiger for sure. You're not going to be seeing a tiger with a 410 unless you had a death wish. But this one's actually heavier than what the black powder one is. This one was 7 pounds. So you're not going to be feeling too much recoil firing 410 out of that. The weight on that's going to tame that 410 round. We're into 45 long haul for that matter too. Let's go back over here. And then you got what they're calling the original Howdah. Which one's this a replica of? Okay, this one's the same thing. It's a replica of a one that would have been made by Ithaca back in around 1920. You notice this one's got a front and rear sight on this one. See the rear sight there above the barrels in the middle. Yeah. So you can see how they progressed. Excuse me. But, and you see the checkering on them. Where the other one, I don't think had the checkering like this one does. This one would have been a little bit higher cost because it did have the checkering front and back. So it's got the checkering there on the handguard too. But this would have been more indicative of things that you would see in the 20s. You would start having machinery back then that would be able to do the checkering. So the prices on checkering would have came down around the 20s and 30s. So you would see that more on more firearms in that period than you would have in the earlier periods. And notice this one's got the tank safety. Whether that was original to these or not, I don't know. To be perfectly honest with you. I don't know if that's on there because of the current laws or if they actually had those back then. But if it's one that was put on there because of laws, they did again make it to where it would look like it could have been from the period. So that's a nice touch from the company that manufactures. I believe these are Chiappas. No, Pedersoli. Okay. So Pedersoli did a good job of making the tank safety. If it wasn't original, looked like it could have been. But that's about it in the way of shotgun technology back in the Old West. I mean, if you want, you could throw the Browning designed pump action shotgun into an Old West conversation because they would have been around right at the tail end of that and going into World War One. And in that time frame, he also would have came out with his first semi-auto. But you don't really see those a lot in like the Western movies and stuff because they weren't as common as what the double barrels or even the lever action shotgun would have been. So you don't, and the lever action shotgun wasn't all that common, but you know, the one you would see the most would have been the double barrel. Wasn't until you got to the 1900s that you really started seeing the pump actions and the semi-autos start taking prominence. That's why I didn't really look for those because it really wasn't something you would have seen. They would have been really expensive and weren't produced in all that many numbers at that period. So, any questions about any of the shotguns we looked at?
No, not right offhand. No.
Yeah, none for me.
Alrighty. So, anybody? I don't know if we got time before midnight goes live to get into the cap and ball. We could maybe talk about those next week. Anybody got anything else they want to talk about? On anything else? I mean, but because you see, there's a lot of these that so and a lot of different varieties and different calibers and stuff. So I don't want to start getting into the discussion on these yet.
Yeah, them little snub noses look right bad.
Yeah, that's a pepper box. The cylinder on that, the cylinder, the chambers in the cylinder on that were the barrels.
Huh.
I guess we could talk a little bit about some of them. Like the Walker. For a very long time, this was the most powerful handgun in the world. These were made specifically for the Texas Rangers. Walker comes from Captain Walker, the guy who commissioned them. He was captain of the Texas Rangers. He wanted something that was going to be more powerful than what was already on hand, something that could be fired from horseback and have the power of a rifle. And this is what Colt came up with. They are roughly equivalent to the modern day 357 Magnum in power. And they are a cap and ball revolver. These were known to crack frames and cylinders. If you weren't careful, you could have it blow up on you.
Well, that ain't good.
This one isn't quite to that level. This one's in 44 caliber cap and ball, which means if you bought the cylinder, the conversion cylinder for it would turn it into a 45 long Colt. You're not. So, yeah, they were. This was prior to the. Like it says here, prior to the introduction of the 357 Magnum in 1935, no revolver was more powerful. The closest thing in power would have probably have been the C96 with its 7.65 Mauser cartridge. Those things were pretty potent too back then. And that would have been late 1800s. One of the first semi-automatic pistols.
I wonder how the recoil was on it.
Oh, I'm sure you probably packed a pretty decent punch. And this was right around the power of the 357 Magnum, but they were heavy too. Let's see, what was the weight on one of these? 4.5 pounds. So, yeah, the recoil wouldn't have been as bad as what you might think it would be with it being 4.5 pounds. But my Smith & Wesson 627 is a 357 Magnum. It weighs about 3 pounds, and in using full load 357 Magnum rounds, the recoil's not bad. My wife loves shooting the thing, so I mean, it's recoil wouldn't have been as bad as what you might think it would be. And if you look at the overall length, it was 15.7 inches in overall length. It was a big gun. They had 9-inch barrels on them, so they weren't small guns by any stretch of imagination. The Walkers, they were big, and they packed a heck of a punch. Still smaller and more easily used from horseback than a rifle, but they packed plenty of punch for a handgun back then. For what the Texas Rangers wanted them for, which mainly was Indian fighting. That was one of the things they had issues with, was fighting the Indians, and they wanted something that was going to pack more punch, because a lot of the pistol calibers at that point in time didn't have enough power to knock an Indian out of their, off their horse. This did. You got hit with one of these, you knew it. This really was a game changer. There were plenty of Texas Rangers that had their lives saved by one of these things. Whereas the guns prior to that, they may not have made it out of the fight. And following up on the Walker, another interesting thing about the Walker. I don't want to get into. If you notice on the front here where the ramrod is, there was no catch for it. On the later designs, like the Colt 1860 Army or the 1851 Navy, the Remington 1858, there would have been a spring-loaded catch that held the ramrod up. The Walkers didn't have that, and over time, after being fired, that would come loose and it would swing. So if you look at some of the old pictures, the Texas Rangers would have rigged like wire or leather to hold that in place so that it wasn't swinging. If that's swinging down, it pushes this ramrod back, and you end up with a ramrod going back into one of the chambers on your cylinder. When you fire it, that's not a good thing. Your cylinder's not going to rotate, and you're going to get you're going to have a dead handgun in your hands. It's not going to do anything. So they would rig ways for that to be held in place to keep that from happening. Like I said, with leather or wire, combination of the two, whatever they had on hand that they could do it with. I think the Dragoons had that problem too, if I remember right. Which the Dragoon came after the Walker. Over here. Here's the Dragoon.
So is that like the first Glock where you had duct tape stuff on?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, here's your first instance of the Dragoon. You see they started to have a little catch there, but it wasn't as effective as what the later styles would be. So again, you would have potential for that to come loose after a while. Nowhere near as bad as the Walker, but the potential was still there. So even on the Dragoon, some of the Dragoons, you would see people putting like wire and stuff to hold their ramrod in place. These would have been 44 caliber. Notice the cylinder is nowhere near as big as the one on the Walker. These didn't produce anywhere near the power as what the Walker did, because they realized that, you know what, we're having to repair these weapons just as much as we're taking them into the field. So when Colt designed a follow-up to the Walker with the Dragoon and went back to a smaller cylinder, still produced enough power to where you could use it from horseback and still have a fairly decent result if you had to use it. So this was the next development in the Colt pistols. Again, cap and ball. You see where the little nipples are right there in the cylinder where you would put your cap. And you would load it through the front of the cylinder and then use the ramrod to pack it all in. Make sure you got a good seated well. And you can get conversion cylinders for these, which would turn it into a 45 Colt. This would have been the first design. The Dragoons went through small changes as they through their production run. This would have been a first model. This one would have been from 1848. That's when the Dragoons came about, was 1848, which is, I'm trying to remember, like a year after the Walker. So we were already looking at. Here's a second edition of the Dragoon. You can see there's slight changes. If you remember from the one we were just looking at, there's little subtle changes to it, but basically the same basic design, same caliber, you have the same powder load. And again, you get a conversion cylinder that would turn this into a 45 on the modern market. Back in the day, in the old days when this would have been used, there was no converting it because there were no cartridges, and there weren't a whole lot of people converting Dragoons to full cartridge revolvers back in the 1800s. You had a Dragoon, it was cap and ball. And I believe I think they have a third edition or a third model Dragoon also. Yeah. They do. Okay. And then here's the third model. Again, little differences from the second and the first. Nothing really major, but you know, cosmetically and stuff, you can see a little bit of differences between them. But again, same caliber, 44 caliber, cap and ball revolver, loaded the same way. You can see the little indent.
So how long do you think it would take?
Sorry, what?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just wondering how long it would take to load something like that, load all the cylinders.
I don't know offhand. I mean, the more
I guess it all depends on how experienced you are with it, I guess.
Yeah, the more practice you had, I'm sure the faster it would go. But you see that little cutout there in the frame?
Yeah.
That was to help facilitate loading it. I mean, there were two ways you could do it. You could take the whole pistol apart and load the cylinder that way, and then put it together, and then pack your powder and stuff after you got it put back together. Or you could load it with the cylinder in, which is why they had that little cutout. That was to facilitate you being able to get the ball or even mini ball, because some people who could afford it or had the mold for it could make a mini ball for it. If you remember, the mini ball from the rifle was the conical bullet that had the expanding rear on it once it was fired, so it would hit the rifling. Those were available in pistol calibers as well. So.
Okay.
Yep, that's what that was for. That was to help with the loading process. And you can see it's still, just like today, it's got the force cone like what you would see on a modern revolver, to try and break up the cylinder gap. Even back then, they were realizing that you're going to lose some of your pressure and stuff because of the cylinder being open. So that's been around for a long time, the force cone there. I don't know how many of you even realize that that's what the name of that piece is, but that's where you break between the cylinder and the barrel. That's the force cone. So now you know what that's called. Anyway, yep. And just like with all the Colts, you'll notice there's no sight at the rear. Your sight, just like with the other Colts of the era, is a notch cut into the hammer. Again, not my favorite design of a rear sight, but it's what they did. I just thought I'd mention that part too. And that design would persist all the way through the Civil War, with where the rear sight was the rear hammer, or the hammer. But there's only one hammer, but you get the idea. A little notch cut in the hammer. Excuse me. And you also had a couple of little interesting handguns that came about throughout the years. These little pocket guns. You could find a pocket gun anywhere from a 32, like with these little Remingtons here, to a Navy caliber, which would have been 36 caliber. And they did a little version of the Dragoon too. The little baby Dragoon. You can get a cute little pistol.
Hey, would the 36 caliber be like the most like the modern back then? The more used, I guess, caliber.
36 and 44 were the most used calibers. They were produced in just about equal numbers. I think this is a 31 caliber. 31 caliber would have been like your 32. It would have been equivalent to your 32 Smith & Wesson short. And then the 36 would have been equivalent to like 38 special. And when you get a replacement cylinder to convert a 36, like you got an 1851 Navy, you want to convert it to, you get a conversion cylinder, it goes from being a 36 to a 38 special. What's this one? The police pocket. Is this a 36 or is this a 31? I'm trying to remember. These are a 36. So these basically are a smaller version of Navy revolvers. These pocket police. They basically, yeah. So 36 was a capable cartridge, or not cartridge, but round. This was before cartridges. This would be something that a police officer in a city would have been carrying most likely. You would see them on the frontier, but you would also see these being carried in the city. They could put them in their coat pocket and carry it that way, which is why they call it the police pocket. They also came in longer barrel length as well, where you would have more of a full-size pistol. That's those. And then you got the little Remington style. These are based on the 1858 Colt. I mean, not Colt, Remington. And you can see the design cues are there. It looks like somebody put a 1858, cut off the trigger guard, and then threw it in the dryer for too long. It looks just like a little shrunk down 1858, and these would have been a 13 caliber. And you could get, if you wanted to, if you were to buy one of these today, you could get a conversion cylinder to turn it into a 32 Smith & Wesson short. And it would have to be a 32 short. You don't want to put a 32 long in there. They're 5 rounds. I mean, they would be like backup pistols. You might see gamblers using these because they were small and they could hide them away easy. You know, you could fit one of these in a vest pocket, depending on how big, who made your vest and whatnot, or an inside coat pocket. You can stick it in an inside coat pocket. They were easy for a gambler to hide. So these were popular with gamblers. They were pretty effective at short ranges. You know, like
Yeah,
cross.
I'm sure.
Primarily, who you would see using these would have been like gamblers and professions like that, where they wanted something that they could hide easily, and they did the job. That's basically what you got in pocket pistols back then. Other than if you want something that held more rounds than a Derringer. Derringer, if you remember, were only 2 shots. So with the Remington, you would have 5. I believe all these were 5 shot. So give you 3 more rounds than what Derringers would. And 3 shots.
5's better than 2.
What was that?
I'm saying 5's better than 2.
Oh, for sure. Did we lose everybody? G23 is out there saying nobody else is watching. Yeah. Oh well. Maybe people are watching the replay. But yeah. That's what you got in the pocket pistols. Then we get up into the more Civil War era. You got your navies, which are your 36 calibers. And then we've seen these already in the conversions. Remember back when we were looking at the conversion revolvers, but that's what you got. You got the 1851, which you can see the design cues that the 1851 had from the Dragoon. You notice the front, it has a better clasp there for holding the ramrod in place. But yeah, definitely a clear descendant of the Dragoon. This one would have been a little bit smaller, firing a smaller caliber. But these were very popular. They were made all the way from 1851 to 1872. So they had a good run, considering all the advancements that were made in revolvers during that time period.
Yeah, that is a nice looking revolver, though.
Mm-hmm.
I like that one.
Again, that would be a 36 caliber. That's the main difference between an Army and a Navy is caliber. Armies are 44, Navies are 36. So I think we discussed that before when we were talking about pistols. Yeah, keep that in mind. If whenever you see something listed as a Navy, it's a 36 caliber. If it's listed as an Army, that's a 44 caliber. Again, there's that pepper box. No barrel. The barrels are the chambers in the cylinder. This was short distance self-defense weapon. You weren't going to get real long ranges out of that.
Oh no, I don't think so.
And here's the 1861. You can see how different this one is compared to the previous that was based more off the Dragoon. You got more of a enclosed ramrod and everything, and an even better clasp on the front end to keep the ram in place. And a little bit of different design on the barrel.
That one there looks more like a one of them pump action BB guns.
Well, that's where they got the design for them. But, you still got the rear sight being your hammer. That again, that would be the way Colt did it up until they did the open top cartridge guns, which we discussed earlier. when we were talking about the cartridge handguns. That's the way they were. That's the way they were done. All right. And the next big advancement, this one from a different company, would have been the Remington. These things, I think these are just the most beautiful guns that came out of the Old West.
Yeah.
Look at the lines on that thing. That's just beautiful. And it had a real rear sight. If you've ever picked up a J-frame snub nose, it's got that groove rear sight. That's what the Remingtons had. They had a groove that ran through the top strap, and that was your rear sight. These were a little bit more durable than the Colt because they did have that top strap. You could actually load these a little bit stronger than you could the Colt. And these were available both in a Navy and an Army variety. The one that people always mention is the new model Army, but there was a new model Navy as well, which would have been the 36. And you got actual nice front sight on there, which I don't remember if that was adjustable or not for elevation. But you got a better rear sight. You're not relying on your hammer as your sight. Anytime, maybe it's just me, but anytime your rear sight is moving, that's not a good thing, in my opinion. If you notice that they got right there below where the forcing cone would be down into the bottom chamber, you got a much bigger opening there than what you had on the Colts, which instead of having just that little slant cutout, you actually have an opening there, which makes it a lot real easy to get the ball in there. But you didn't have to do that. These things were so easy to take the cylinder out. All you would do would be drop the rod, and right in that area, you can, between the barrel and the ramrod there, you see what looks like a block. Once you pull that ramrod down, you would just pull that out forward, and you could just roll the cylinder right out without having to take the whole weapon apart. And you could carry extra cylinders with these and reload it very quickly. I think we talked about it earlier when Squib was here, but Squib's not here tonight. But this was the closest thing to a box magazine reloading that they had in the West was one of these Remingtons, because of how fast you could swap that cylinder out. You had to have it. Each cylinder had to be tuned to the gun by a gunsmith before you could do that. But once you had that done, so that your timings wouldn't be off, you could reload one of these much quicker than you could the other cap and ball revolvers. And once you got your new cylinder in, you would just push that part back in, flip your rod back into place, and boom, you were off to the races again. That would take maybe 15 seconds compared to 30 seconds to a minute that would normally take to load like a Colt.
Yeah, it definitely sounds quicker.
That was one of the big things with the Remington. And again, you get those in 36 or 44. You could get them with a brass frame or a steel frame. Steel frames are better. With the brass frames, you really shouldn't put a conversion cylinder in them. But steel frames, you can.
It looked like it'd be too soft, wouldn't it?
Yeah, the brass one can't take the pressure of a modern cartridge. That's why you don't put a conversion cylinder in them. The brass is prettier, but it's not as durable.
Yeah.
This one's absolutely gorgeous. That case coloring on that.
Yeah.
And the brass trigger guard and the walnuts wood. Yeah, these are. Anyway, you can't tell these are my favorite gun from that era. I just love these 1858.
What's the barrel length on that one? Because that looks a little shorter than the other ones.
Yeah, they came in different barrel lengths. they would have put out
Oh,
what
they
they would
did?
call the
Okay.
sheriff or the lawman. With the standard issue, if you were in the military, would have been this length here. But they had
Yeah.
what they called the sheriff or a lawman dish version that would be a little bit shorter, made it quicker to draw for somebody who needed to be able to draw quicker. So that's what you see here. Is the little shorter sheriff fish, which would have been the sheriff's would have been a 5.5-inch barrel. Standard issues an 8-inch barrel. These ones here are just
Yeah, I like
armed.
that 5.5 inch.
Yeah, yeah, I do too. If I were to get into reenactments, I said it when we were looking at the cartridge ones, I would get the factory conversion replica of the 58, where it would actually where it was modified, where it could take the cartridges, because they're just beautiful guns. I just wish it came in the color case hardening like this one, but it only comes in the blue version, which sucks. But,
Yeah.
oh well. Let's see what else we got here in black powder. Well, they're all black powder again, but next we got the 1860 Army. So again, you can see very similar looking to the Navy. The main difference, this one fires a 44 instead of a 36. Basically what they did was they took the Navy, made it a little bit bigger, put a bigger bullet in it, and called it a day. This would
I
have
guess that's
been,
easy enough.
yep, this would have been the standard issue revolver of the Union Army during the Civil War. A lot of soldiers would have had navies as well, and then some would have had the Remington, but this would have been the most common one seen on the battlefield in the hands of the Union, and some Confederates. These came out right before the Civil War, so you did have some of the armories and stuff in the South that did get these right before the war started, so you would see these in the hands of both the North and the South. But there were other revolvers that you would also see in the South, like the Lamont and some others that I can't remember the names of, because the South sported a much wider variety of revolver. Some of them of very dubious quality. The Union, because of their manufacturing centers all being in the North, they got these and they got the Remingtons. So as far as handguns were concerned, the Union was in much better hands than what the South was. And again, like I said, these were 44 caliber, 6 rounds, cap and ball, rear sight, still on your hammer. So that's what you got with these. And I don't know if they made these in shorter barrel lengths. I mean, this one you can't get it with one. Remington did make shorter lengths for law enforcement stuff. I don't know if Colt did with these. But this one's probably one that would have been modified. You notice that barrel doesn't. You don't really have a front sight, do you? Yeah, you do, but it's small. I would assume that something like this was actually modified by a gunsmith, which you would see back then. People would take the guns that they had that they used in the Civil War and that they walked off the battlefield with, and they would take them to a gunsmith and have them modified, mainly to get the barrel length changes. So I'm assuming that this is what this is. Because you notice the grip's different as well. It says more of a bird's head grip on it. And again, the barrel was cut down. So to make this more of a pocket-sized gun, hideaway style. Again, something like that you might see in the hands of a soldier turned gambler, because it's something they could easily hide away. 3-inch barrel on it.
What that thing say is 3 rounds?
No,
Is
no.
that what I seen down in the?
It's 6 rounds. It's got a 3-inch barrel.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yes.
Yeah,
3-inch round barrel.
3-inch round barrel. Okay.
That thing still weighed over 2 pounds. Get an idea how heavy these guns were back then. A lot of that's because the steels that they had back then weren't as good as what we have today, so they had to use more in the construction, to make a stouter firearm. You see one there; it's got a little bit longer barrel. Maybe not. Let's see. What length's this one's barrel? Oh, that's a 3-inch as well. That's interesting. They have it. This is supposed. It's an Army, but they also have it available in a Navy caliber. The Navy caliber will cost you $17 more. Wonder why that is.
Man. That barrel did look longer though,
Yeah, it does
compared
look
to
long.
the other one.
Maybe it's just because of the color. Maybe that being in the white throws off the dimension. Throws the dimensions on your eye off of this one being black on the white background. Maybe you can,
Yeah.
like an optical illusion kind of thing. Yeah, all these guns are interesting from a historical perspective, and they're fun to shoot.
Oh yeah.
These old cap and ball revolvers, they take a lot of more work to get them to where you can fire them than what the cartridge guns do, but they're fun to shoot. They really are. And the size of them and stuff, it really cuts down the weight and stuff. Does cut down on the felt recoil on them. You can see some of the different barrel lengths that they did come in. They came in, but they mostly came in like long barrels with the Colts. You didn't see very many of the short barrels. If you did, it was usually a modified thing that was done by a gunsmith. Whereas Remington, like I was saying, actually marketed a short barrel version. Colt really didn't. It's this one's barrel length. It's a 5.5 on this one. But again, this would have most likely have been something that you would have seen converted by not a blacksmith, a gunsmith.
It looked like pretty decent prices on them too.
Oh yeah, the cap and ball revolvers, they don't cost you a whole lot. What's going to cost you is if you want to put a conversion cylinder on it. You'll pay almost as much for a conversion
I'm sure.
cylinder as the handgun itself. You're looking at $200 for a conversion cylinder. They're cool from a historical perspective. Again, the Colt's not my choice in these. I like Remington, but if I had the Colt back then instead of the Remington, I wouldn't feel outgunned going against somebody that had the Remington. Look at this one. Just see if
I like all of them.
Look at the engraving on that. I don't know if you can see it or not, but
yeah,
this is a Buffalo Bill commemorative one here. It's probably going to be a little bit higher than what the standard is. Let's see. Yeah, $705 for this one. With that engraving, I can see why. That's pretty.
I might have to go ahead and get me one of them. They are right interesting.
And just like with reloading, you got to just make sure you have the right powder charge in there. You don't want to overload it, But you get one of the conversion cylinders, and you don't have to worry about that. Let's see. Yeah, so here's the conversion cylinder. You're looking at 220 for that conversion cylinder for that little Remington we were looking at. The 1858. The 1858 for a 36 caliber, you're looking at 240. 240 for that one. The Walker conversion is 250. The Uberti Dragoons 250. The 1851 and 1861 Navies are 215. So yeah, you're looking at over $200 for the conversion cylinders. But you know, they're easier to deal with than what the black powder would be. But if you want to get the full experience, you got to do the old way, right? With the black
Yeah.
powder. And there's one more to look at, and this one's pretty cool too. This is the one you always hear Night Strike raving about, the Lamat. The Lamat's a 9-shot cylinder
Oh
with a
yeah.
shotgun in the middle, 20-gauge shotgun, which is your last resort when you need to.
Oh yeah. I think you showed this before, didn't you?
I might have, but
No, I don't think it was this one. I think you were talking about it.
yeah. But these were cool from just the engineering aspect of it all. You know, you got 9 rounds of caliber. I'm trying to remember what caliber these are. 44. So these were 9 rounds of 44. You know, same one that was used by the Colt and the Remington. And then you got a 20-gauge shotgun. These were harder to reload. Yeah, we talked about it before because we were talking about how you could convert one to fire cartridges. That was what, 2 weeks ago, I think. But yeah, these were cool. For just from a technological standpoint, I think these are cool.
Was just like a single shotgun shell?
Yeah, it's a single shot because this is a muzzle loading shotgun. You had cap and ball revolver with
Oh,
a
okay.
muzzle loading shotgun underneath. That was last resort. And the way that you would fire it, you see the hammer? I don't know if you can tell there that it's hinged. The position that it's in now would fire your standard 40 caliber. But then right where that hinges, you would flip that down and then it would hit the cap to fire the shotgun.
Oh, okay.
So that's how that worked.
That's pretty nifty little gun there.
Yeah, they were cool little guns. But they weren't very durable from what some people have said. But yeah, they're an interesting little thing for sure. Just from the technological standpoint of it, where they got that to work, where the cylinder revolved around the shotgun barrel.
Oh man.
Yeah, they were an interesting. I wish they showed the other side so that you could see where the ramrod and stuff was on it, but they don't show the other side of it. The reloading. Oh yeah, they do. It's right there. It's on the left side. Okay, I see it now. See right there along the barrel.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The barrel. There's your ramrod. You would, and that's what you would use to reload the pistol part of it. And then you'd have to use a separate ramrod for the shotgun.
That thing looked like it got more gadgets on it than a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, man. Again, the ingenuity that it took to be able to get the revolver to where it would use the shotgun barrel as its pivot point is crazy. And you can see, I mean, if you look right there in that little gap underneath the hammer between the cylinder and the frame, you can see the little itty bitty thing that it's rotating around there. And then about halfway up the cylinder, it starts revolving around the shotgun barrel.
Man. Some crazy stuff they had going on that one.
Mm-hmm. That's about it for the cap and balls. This is probably the most interesting and coolest of the cap and ball pistols. Just like from like when we were talking on the bracket, when we were talking about the double action army, about how that
Yeah.
was like the coolest of the pistols from that era. This is the coolest of the pistols from the Civil War era, just because of the technological stuff and engineering that went into it. Might not have been the best, but it was definitely the
That's
coolest.
a pretty sweet little gun there.
Stop sharing. What's that? Oh, where'd everybody else go?
I think Rob had a little trouble outside his house. He had to go check on him.
There's something in his driveway.
Yeah.
And Stacy says she went to cook food. Alrighty. I'm probably gonna have to start wrapping her up soon anyway. Yep, Midnight sent his links out, so we gotta start wrapping it up anyway. Got anything you want to
Alright.
plug? Anything you want to plug real quick?
Not really. Hopefully I get to the range this weekend and got to do some videos or something. Hopefully I have 4 days off this weekend, so just thanks for the invite and everything. Glad to be here.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for stopping in and being the last one sticking around.
And they always told me you got to kick me out the door.
And I got nothing to add. So with that all said and done, ladies and gentlemen, if you're out there watching still, thanks for sticking around, and we will catch you next week. Have a good one, and see you on down the range. This is where you throw out your tagline.
Man, it's been a long day today.